This is the iNaturalist tutorial for microscopic specimens. This assumes that you have created a iNaturalist account and maybe that you played with the phone app a little bit so you have some sense of how it works and how the database works. But for microscopic specimens, it's a little different because you're typically not taking pictures of them at the site where you're collecting them. You're typically taking them home, putting them on the microscope and examining them there. So that means that you're probably doing it on a computer rather than on a phone or a tablet, which also means that it's not going to correctly autofill some of those fields, like your geolocation and your date and time when you've collected them, because that happened at a different site and different time. So it's a little more complicated, but it allows a little bit more curation, a little bit more precision, and more data quality control. So let's look at that. And this again relies on the fact that you have already taken a bunch of pictures, that you have organized them well, named them in a way that you can navigate easily. The site has a bunch of useful built-in functions, but some of the things you have to do yourself. So let's click on upload. And very conveniently, you can just drag and drop photos and sounds, and you can do many at a time. So it makes sense to first examine your sample, take the pictures, nicely crop them, put scale bars on them, name them in a way that makes sense, and organize them in a folder that has an informative name. So for example, I have made a folder with, in this case, just 4 specimens, but imagine there would be 40 or more in there. You can do sort of this batch upload. That's very convenient. The name of my folder is New Ipswich Flood Site, and then the date. So I know where and when they were all collected. I'm just going to grab them and drop them all here. You see the first problem. These 2 pictures are just 2 different views in 2 different focal planes of the same specimen. So we don't want that to be 2 different entries in the database. But easily you can drag one into the other, and now you have an observation with 2 different photos. So you'll have to go through and make sure that you don't have these redundancies of multiple pictures of the same specimen. You want those in the same observation. You can also see that based on the information associated with those pictures, the times were autofilled, dates and times. In this case, these 2 I observed on the same date when I collected them, May 15th, so I can leave that. The time doesn't matter so much. But this one I took a picture of a bit later, so I'm gonna have to fix that manually. So again, you'll have to go through, maybe you'll have many of them here, you'll have to sift through them and correct anything that didn't get entered properly automatically. Another nice thing, if you notice, I had them named with the taxon names that I at least felt comfortable assigning them. So this one, I knew the species, Desmidium epidonum. And you can see if I put that name in the name of the file with an underscore in between, it will correctly pull that taxon out of the database and assign that name. For Sterastrum, these 2 species, these are 2 different species of Sterastrum. I didn't feel comfortable calling the name without delving into the literature a little deeper, so I just called them Sterastrum 1, Sterastrum 2, and it just assigned them that genus name, and that's fine for now. So you can also see that I had already put the scale bars there, etc. If you have taken measurements, like you probably should, you can enter them into the description. So that would be really useful. I didn't, for these example ones, I did not actually take dimensions for them, but as you're taking notes when you're microscoping, this is something that should go into the description so that it is available to go with the specimen, and I don't have to go on the screen with a ruler and try to retroactively do the measurements. So that would be in the description, and you could enter individually. What about the location though? So microscope pictures don't have a geolocation like your picture from your phone would. but you can find the location on the map. Now, this is kind of tedious to do for every single observation, but if you have all of these from one locality, and again, imagine there would be 40 or 50 there, you can highlight them all, and you can edit multiple observations at a time. So let's say I just wanted all of them to be the same, the 15th, if I hadn't already done that, but also I could also have them be the same location. And again, this is a little tedious, but if you know the latitude, longitude, you can certainly enter that, and it will find that geolocation, but you can also just find it on the map. And since I know pretty exactly where I was, I'm just going to zoom in on that here. I was at this wetland, and in fact, I know that I was standing on this rock that kind of protrudes into the water, so I can just click on that. If you're not so sure, you can expand that circle and sort of say, I collected it anywhere near here. And that circle can be a mile wide if you really don't know. But try to be reasonably precise if you know where you collected those specimens. Again, if you collected maybe multiple around the pond, then maybe it makes sense to have a circle that covers the entire pond. That's fine. You can, if for whatever reason you don't want to disclose where exactly it was, you can also have an obscure or private observation, so it will not be visible to other users on the site. That can be relevant if you think you've collected a rare or endangered species and you don't want it to be, maybe collected or harvested by somebody. So you can obscure the geotag. So now I press update, and it updated that geolocation for all three. So that's good. You can, again, add descriptions, which you probably should. You can add other tags. You can add them to projects. So I have many projects that add automatically, but the freshwater algae one doesn't, so I'm just going to add that here. You can add to as many projects as you want. So here we have them, and we're ready to upload. I'm going to say submit 3 observations. It'll take a second. And sometimes what happens, if you go to the project where you just added them, it might not be automatically there. It might take a few minutes for the system to sort of refresh and show everything as it is, but just be patient. So now I or other people can go in and from the description, the measurements, and the morphology, I can try to identify which species it was. Now, this is an apical view of Sterestrum, so that might not, in fact, be possible. That's okay. For this Desmidium, I'm pretty confident that it's Desmidium aptagonum. It could be Desmidium schwartzii. Maybe some of my collaborators will chime in and ID either agree or disagree with my ID. Same thing for Sterestrum. Again, if I had a description, proper dimensions here, you can see that third process is protruding forward. Otherwise, this kind of almost looks like a cosmarium. We can see the ornamentation, maybe sharp granules or something like that on the surface of the cell wall. We might be able to identify the species based on this image. So this is really convenient for sharing the observations, having other experts weigh in on the taxonomy, and it being sort of a permanent record of where and when this species was seen, with photo documentation and again, ideally also some other